Ric Grenell is joining us as well. He's our Special Advisor for National Security and Foreign Policy, and he was just in Kosovo and Serbia after broking this deal. And Rick, I want you to tell people too, because this is unique. You're on a broadcast a couple times a week. This unique role out when you left the government, you took on this role voluntarily on Serbia and Kosovo specifically, and within a very short time period, were able to broker a deal, an economic deal, and now you just told people about this lake that has been renamed. But tell people about your role too.
Yeah, so this really started where I was trying to help both sides when I was in Berlin as ambassador to Germany, and I could see a little bit of an opening, a little bit of requests from both sides that seemed to make sense, and it was more economic driven. Jordan, as you know, we did 3 historic agreements when I was ambassador to Germany on air flights. So the first air flight between the capital in Kosovo and the capital in Serbia, Belgrade, to Pristina, that was a historic agreement. Then we did a rail agreement where they were going to share railways. We picked rail routes in between the two countries and solidified a relationship to grow those railways with commerce from both sides. And then we did a historic motor agreement so that there could be border crossings. So we did these 3 agreements before we did a larger economic normalization agreement at the White House. All 4 of these agreements together really form an economic normalization, what President Trump does well, which is create jobs, create an economy. The smarty pants foreign policy types in Washington, D.C. have been fighting about this issue for 21 years. Yeah. They go to the table and they talk about the same symbolic political issues. I know that symbolism is important. I know that there are some political issues of high importance, but we can't make progress if we just sit there and try to not talk about the elephant in the room, which is job creation. Young people leaving Pristina, leaving Belgrade by the droves, going to Poland and Hungary and Germany and other places. So this has become an issue for the region, the entire Balkan region, of just trying to do economic normalization. President Trump had the vision, we implemented it, and you see now this historic agreement that even the Nobel Peace Prize committee members have to take notice because of the nomination for President Trump in doing economic normalization between Kosovo and Serbia.
And Rick, this launched, then you had the announcement on Kosovo and Serbia, and then we had the announcement on the UAE, and then Bahrain, and we hear that there's 5 to 9 more additional countries that are coming, and they're all centered around this focus, this new way of thinking. And we talked about this last week when you were on, and since then you've been back in those two countries in Kosovo and Serbia. But this new way of thinking about economic partnerships, exchanging people, exchanging commerce, and many of those young people who, as you talk about these conflicts that existed, maybe for 21 years they've been trying to figure out in Washington D.C. how to fix it. These are young people just looking for a job. They want to get out of their parents' house like everybody does. They want to be able to provide maybe for their family. And yes, these conflicts, it's not like they're not in the background of their life. That was more recent than it's a recent activity. If they weren't involved, likely they have a dad, a brother, somebody who was, a grandfather who was. Okay, so it's recent, but still more important that you can put food on the table.
Yeah, look, I mean, you hit it on the head. These are very serious political issues, so we don't want to dismiss them. But they were largely 21 years ago, and so the emotions are still there for many people. And those problems and those issues need to be solved. There needs to be a reconciliation. There needs to be a time where we have a truth and reconciliation process, which has begun, but it really has not finished. I think our listeners are probably thinking, boy, it makes really a lot of sense to do job creation, economic development. Symbolism doesn't put food on the table, but jobs do. And so I think our listeners are thinking that seems like such a no-brainer to go after the economic side first. I'll tell you what, though, Jordan, it's not a no-brainer for the Washington, D.C. types who constantly just want to talk about politics. And so the outsider status of Donald Trump and the ability that he has to not think like the Washington, D.C. types, to not go back to the same old table with the same old arguments. Joe Biden has had this for 47 years. The Obama-Biden administration did very, very little, if anything, for Kosovo and Serbia. And so I think that our listeners have got to recognize that the outsider status is what produces these incredible deals, because it's kind of bringing realism to these arguments.
Yeah.
If we left it up to the Washington, D.C. types, we would still be sitting at a table of politics, talking about politics and wondering why we can't solve these issues. I have to applaud Donald Trump in how he thinks. And we also have to recognize that the Washington establishment, which includes the media, politicians that have been there for 40 plus years, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Joe Biden, all of that crowd hates Donald Trump with a passion, because he's the outsider bringing in his different way of thinking, not playing by their rules. I keep saying this, but the rules of Washington are that the Speaker of the House gets to fly to San Francisco to break the rules and have her hair done, and the salon owner is supposed to shut up. And when the salon owner says, wait a minute, it seems hypocritical that you're doing this and you're telling others, what happens? The Speaker of the House asks for an apology from the salon owner, because the salon owner didn't play by the DC rules.
Yeah. Now, Rick, we know as well. I mean, you talked about it too. They've actually renamed, because the president has been very popular on lakes in America. There's these MAGA, events going, but this important lake in between Kosovo and Serbia. You said mostly in Kosovo, but that has played kind of this role of what to do. Where they've actually renamed as Lake Trump.
Yeah. So this is a really interesting point. In the economic normalization package, we wanted to take this lake and figure out how to create jobs and energy. And there's not enough going on with it in terms of economic development. So our Department of Energy said, we will send in a team of our experts and engineers to do a feasibility study around the lake to figure out how to create jobs, how to create some energy projects, how to utilize the lake better for the people. And the fight that I had between the two sides was, yeah, that feasibility study and job creation sounds amazing, but we got to call it the Serbian name, or we got to call it the Albanian Kosovo name. And so there was this incredible fight about the name. And so I kind of jokingly said, weeks later, after we wrestled through the agreement and we're still having a fight about the name, I said, well, I'm just going to keep referring to it as Lake Trump, so that I don't have to pick one side or the other to make the other side angry. And both leaders jumped at it and said, I'm okay with Lake Trump. Let's call it Lake Trump.